All right, let's get started. Good morning. Welcome to the Early Memory Loss Conference hosted by Alzheimer's Los Angeles in partnership with Mary S. Easton Center for Alzheimer's Disease Research at UCLA. My name is Alicia Villegas. I'm the Director of Early Stage and Latino Services here at Alzheimer's Los Angeles. It is an honor to be here with you and welcome you to this virtual event. If you're here to gain insight, information, and inspiration into this important issue that has touched your life, I believe you will not be disappointed. We have a great conference planned for you, filled with information from experts in the field, courageous people who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, who will share their stories with you, and we will share resources that can help guide you once the conference is over. In my work at Alzheimer's Los Angeles, I see and hear stories that touch the heart and speak to the best part of us. I hope the information and experiences we share with you today will help warm your heart, inform your life, and empower you with the hope and courage to face the challenges of tomorrow. Throughout the conference, you'll be muted to help decrease background noise and help us all hear this valuable information as clear as possible. If you have questions at any time during our conference, we will be taking questions in the following way. You can type your questions at any time during the conference by clicking on the Q&A button below. My colleague Tori will help answer your questions directly or privately, depending on what your question might be. If your question is not answered today, you can share your contact information with us in the event evaluation that will be shared with you after the conference has concluded. We will help connect you and get your questions answered. Additionally, completing an evaluation will enter you in a drawing to receive a gift card, and we would really appreciate your feedback. We have scheduled breaks, so you will have time to get up and go to the bathroom, stretch, refill your cup of coffee or tea, or grab a snack if you need one. As I mentioned earlier, be sure to have a pen and paper handy to jot down notes or questions. All right, now I would like to introduce Heather Cooper-Ortner. Ms. Cooper-Ortner serves as President and CEO at Alzheimer's Los Angeles. The mission at Alzheimer's Los Angeles is to improve the lives of local families affected by Alzheimer's or a related dementia by increasing awareness, delivering effective programs and services, providing compassionate support, and advocating for quality care and a cure. Heather, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Alicia, and thank you. Welcome, everyone. I think you are in for a very special treat today. This is one of my favorite programs of the year because I know just how much everyone who comes to this event really gets out of it. So thank you all for joining us today. Many thanks to our partner, the Mary S. Easton Center for Alzheimer's Disease and Research at UCLA. We could not have a better community partner in the Easton Center and are so grateful for their continued partnership, especially Monica Moore from the Easton Center, who works with us on so many things. Monica sometimes I think is a member of our team, still not a member of the Easton Center, but we are so grateful for everything that she does in partnership with us and with the Easton Center to help support people who are living with memory loss. Additional thanks to our staff and our speakers who are working behind the scenes to make everything go so smoothly today. I want to specifically thank Alicia, who you see up on the screen with me. Alicia, you'll hear a lot from Alicia today. She's going to run today's program, and she is amazing. And I also want to give special thanks to Carmen Tawagan, who is, I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. I think it's Tawagan. I think I put the accent on the wrong syllable, Carmen, so please forgive me. And Tori Boyer, Alicia mentioned Tori as well. Tori is a care counselor who focuses on working with people who have early stage Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment, and you'll learn more about all of those things in a little while. They have all worked so hard over the last several months to make today happen, and we are so lucky to have them all here with us today, making sure that that you all get everything you need out of this. I want to give a really special thank you to Elliot and Marisha Sainer, who, although they can't be here this morning, know that it's happening. Elliot and Marsha have provided very generous funding over the years for this program, and we could not be doing this without their support, so we're always very, very grateful. As a nonprofit, we do rely on donations, and I want to thank all of you who, even before we got started this morning, have so far contributed over $1,000, which is remarkable. Even before you came to the program, some of you felt the desire to give, and we're so grateful for those, for your contributions. It's not necessary, but every dollar counts and helps us provide these services. Also, special thank you to Biogen, who also provided some support for today. So Alzheimer's LA has been around for over 40 years. And we recognize that people who are dealing with memory concerns may feel frustrated, alone, and frightened. And if that describes you, you are in the right place. This conference is designed with years of experience. We've spent time listening and learning from people who have been in your seats in the past and have worked very hard to put together a program for people like you. So I'm going to quickly wrap up because I don't want us to go over, and apparently I might be talking too much, and I'm not what you want to hear today. We wish we could be in person with you, but we're grateful to be able to at least connect with you virtually today. And if you don't have all of your questions answered, don't forget to put your contact information, as Alicia said, in the final survey, and we will reach out to you. I want to give a quick plug to our Memory Club, which is another early stage program. If you find today helpful, I strongly encourage you to reach out to Tori and Alicia and inquire about our next Memory Club. It's a longer program rather than a one-day program, and we'll build on a lot of what you're going to learn today. I want to give a really special thank you to our speakers, who have been wonderful community partners with us as well. And I'm going to hand this back over to Alicia and wish you all a lovely day. And thank you again for waking up and being with us today.
Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate you joining us and highlighting a couple of the things that you did, especially our Memory Club. And yes, please reach out to Tori or myself, and we would be happy to have a conversation with you or answer any questions that you might have about Memory Club or any of our early stage programs. And before we get into our expert speaker, I would like to review the process to submit your questions once again. If at any time during the presentation you have questions, you can submit that question by clicking on the Q&A tab that you can find at the bottom of your screen. My colleague Tori will help answer your questions directly, or she will hold on to that question and we will ask the speaker at the end of her presentation. If your question is not answered today, please fill out an event evaluation, and we're gonna share that question with the event speaker or with whoever needs to get back to you. And that person will be in touch with you. All right, so I would now like to introduce Rebecca Goldfarb, estate planning and elder law attorney at Goldfarb & Lew. Ms. Goldfarb co-founded Goldfarb & Lew on the principle that quality estate plans should be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. Having been the caregiver for 7 people in her family, including her grandfather who had Alzheimer's, elder law is dear to her heart. She treats each client as family and helps each family navigate the aging process. And as Heather said, Rebecca is also a part of our Alzheimer's LA family, and she's a wonderful partner, has joined us for many of our early memory loss conferences. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us and sharing this very important, valuable information.
Absolutely. It's always an honor to be here. So I I think of all of you like my Alzheimer's family, and count on you for so much for clients and as resources. And I'm so grateful that you do what you do, because the experience of all of the people who go through your programs is 180 degrees different than when my grandpa had Alzheimer's, which is now a very long time ago, but in the late 80s and 90s. He died in 1992. So just this experience, when you can talk about this, both as the person with Alzheimer's and as the family, and learn and share, is just night and day. So I always get sentimental because it's so important. Okay, I told myself I was not going to cry this morning. I barely said a word. All right, I'm ready to go.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
So you're doing it in the
Yes.
It's just not in the.
So Ricky can or we can move it for you. So if you want to go on to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So today I promised to teach you something new, and I want to make sure that everyone who is watching takes care of yourself first, and then we're going to talk about elder law. I have lots of checklists and things to think about. So unfortunately, I have to go extraordinarily fast. So I apologize for that in advance, but I will always answer questions. So either at the end of this, I'll answer questions, or if we run out of time, you can reach out to me via email, and I'm happy to answer every single question. So this is your moment to get free legal advice, and we can go to the next slide. So first, step one, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. Next. And what is the purpose of an estate plan? And some people already know this because they have it and they've been through the process, and other people, this is brand new. So essentially, it is a set of about 4 documents with some ancillary ones, where together they should honor your wishes, avoid court, and maintain family harmony. Next. Unfortunately, 99% of the plans that we see have a fatal flaw in one of these 3 areas, which is very disappointing. But, sometimes we're able to catch it, and sometimes it's not the end of the world, but it's so important to us that these plans are very comprehensive. Next. So this is kind of estate planning 101 in the big 30,000 foot overview, and then I'm going to go into each document in more detail. So there are 4 main documents. The first, the Advanced Healthcare Directive. This is where you name someone to make medical decisions for you, and you specify what your wishes are. This is called a living will. The wishes part is a living will, but in California, we just call it the power of attorney for healthcare, or the Advanced Healthcare Directive. And the power of attorney for finance is separate. So this is the document where if you need someone to make legal or financial decisions for you, then you need that document. This is next. It's so weird that I can't just push it. This is for everyone over 18. So if you are over 18, which I think everyone here is, then you need the advanced directive and power of attorney. This is not based on how much money you have. It's just that no one can make decisions for you once you become incapacitated. So a trust and a will essentially do the same thing. They say who gets your stuff when you pass away. But all wills, if you have enough assets, go through probate. And trusts, if they're done properly, avoid court altogether and are private. In everything that's distributed in a will is outright right in that moment. But with a trust, we can what we call control from the grave. So we can sprinkle assets over time if there are young people, or create special needs trusts if that's important, based on the family dynamic. So next. So if you have assets, or you have kids or people who have special needs, then absolutely you need a trust. Next. So this is one of the myths. I don't need an estate plan because my family will just handle everything. And unfortunately, I think decades ago that kind of worked, but the laws are so strict now in so many ways that it doesn't. So even your spouse can't make these decisions for you. And depending upon how assets are owned, spouses may not even have access to that. So it's really important to find a lawyer who matches what you need and to make sure to walk through all of these issues with him or her. Next. So I have a polling question. I'm wondering how many people have estate plans and how many people have updated them in the last 3 years. I'm not sure. Can we do the poll? Oh, here we go. All right, I'm going to answer it too. It's kind of not fair, I know. Oh, I can't answer it. It says the host or panelist can't vote. All right, so I'm wondering if you have one, and then if you've updated it recently. So we'll give you like a minute to answer that. I can't see anything other than it on the screen, so I'm just waiting for someone to click a button that populates the results. I'm always so eager to see this. All right, so a little over half of you have one, which is great. And a little more have not updated it than who have. So congratulations to all of you who have it already. You are still going to learn something today. And big kudos to those of you who have updated it fairly recently. And for those of you who don't have it, or you haven't updated it, then you're in for a treat because you're going to learn a lot. All right, next slide. So here's the problem. I think that the slide, something's tweaked with the slides because it's not in slide view the way, anyway. So the problem is that people either don't have them when they need them, or it doesn't work when they need them. And that is extremely frustrating. Next. So as I mentioned, a lot of the estate plans we review have a fatal flaw. They either have outdated documents, right? They don't represent their wishes, the laws have changed, or they have missing documents. I don't know why, but we still see documents today where there's no power of attorney or no advance directive, or the will was never signed. And obviously you want all of this to work, so it has to be a complete package. And poorly written documents, sadly, we do see documents even written by other attorneys where it's vague or ambiguous. And the last thing you want is different attorneys being able to interpret documents differently. You want it to be crystal clear. Some people will do this on their own, and so they really don't have good counsel, or they'll go to attorneys who don't specialize in this. And then there are so many nuances, they just get missed. We do see, and this is, partly I blame the attorneys for this in not doing enough education, but we do see people who are selecting the wrong fiduciaries. And either they are putting two people together when they shouldn't be, or they're just naming people because they think they should name them in a certain order. But really, we need to look at what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, and do they match that person, or is it like a square peg in a round hole, and we're just setting ourselves up for disaster. And last, but certainly not least, we see that trusts are not funded. In the last four years of all of the reviews that we've done, so it's been hundreds, there's only been one person who has walked away from that initial meeting saying, I'm good the way I am. Every single other person has said, uh-oh, I really need to make changes. And it's extremely rare, if not never, that the trust is properly funded. So that means if the trust isn't properly funded, it may end up triggering court. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Next. Oh, you can just flip through each one. I think it's when it transfers from the Mac to a PC that it messes up the formatting a little bit. So the solution, you need to find the right law firm. You need to make sure that you are educated and empowered and you collaborate together so that you create a plan that works when you need it. this means you have to have a lifelong relationship with the law firm because your wishes will change, the laws will change, and people will change over time. Next. So what happens if you become incapacitated? Next. I'm going to take a little drink. So Stacy and Vinny are dear friends of mine. We all live in Topanga. I have beautiful trees behind me. And Vinny got into a really bad accident at work in his 40s. He is now, oh my God, he's got to be like 70 now. He was incapacitated. He was in a coma, and she didn't have the documents ready. So she had to petition for conservatorship. And this has been an ongoing relationship with an attorney and the court. It is extraordinarily expensive and invasive. So if there's the ability to create this advance directive and power of attorney, now is the time to do it. Next. So this is our advance directive. We go into a ton of details. I think they're really important because this is the most important document to me when you lose capacity and you're relying on people to care for you. You know, the will and the trust, that's all important for sure, but you are in fact gone at that point, so you won't know it at least. But this advance directive, you want to make sure on two different levels that it's really detailed. One is that you get your wishes honored because you've set out what they are. But even equal, I was going to say more important, but equally important is it's a big responsibility. It's a burden that you're putting on someone to have to stand in your shoes and make decisions. So the more specificity you have, I think the less of a burden that is on the person making decisions. So first and foremost, got to pick the right people. Not everyone is set up for this job and to do it well. The effective date should be immediate in all documents. And you need a HIPAA waiver and the CMIA waiver. These are the federal and state privacy laws, and you must have that in place. If you have significant allergies, you want that noted. Not everyone will know that. We talk about care managers. Obviously, I think a lot of people know about that here. We have an advanced driving directive, and I talk about this advanced driving directive with, clients in their late 20s, all the way into their 90s, because when it isn't safe to drive anymore, it is extremely stressful on everyone, the person who's still driving and the family. And so we talk through those issues. We talk about CPR and DNR and a pulse. I have a slide on that later. And quality of life is really important. So what is quality of life for you, both mentally and physically? We want to make sure that you define that so that if you don't have quality of life anymore, then we don't do heroic things or even moderate intervention things to keep you going in a condition you wouldn't want to be in. Obviously, we talk about organ donation and all of the details. One legacy is the organ donation for Southern California. So we just follow everything that they ask. My wishes is something that my law partner, Din, and I made up. And it is a laundry list of all the things that bring you comfort and drive you crazy. You want to be able to be surrounded by those things that give you comfort. We talk about all the details of memorial and additional things. Next. So just to recap, the issues that we see for those of you who have advanced directives already or who are going to create them, and you want to make sure that when you talk to the lawyer that you talk through all these issues, you want to make sure you don't have the wrong agents, right? I only like co-agents. That means two people serving in this role together. If the document addresses what happens if they disagree, who supersedes whom, or as a third party coming in to be a tiebreaker. Springing powers means we have to deem you incapacitated by a physician. This is getting harder and harder to do. My belief is that they don't want to get involved in the legal process, and I don't blame them. So you want to make sure these are immediate. We do still see a lot of missing privacy waivers. And while many, I shouldn't say most, while a lot of doctors and nurses may violate HIPAA, there are penalties for it, and you shouldn't set yourself up for failure in that way if they, abide by that law. And then there's insufficient details, right? We want to know quality of life and all of those extra details. Next. So the durable power of attorney for finance does not have as many details as the advance directive, but it is very important. We want to make sure we select the right agents. You cannot pick someone just based on it's my oldest kid. Do not pick people who are co-agents together. More and more financial institutions are not accepting those documents. And once you lose capacity, you cannot update or create them. So it's very important to do it right. And you want someone who has financial savviness and isn't, living paycheck to paycheck or struggling financially, because the temptation to access your money for his or her own benefit is too great. And sadly, we have seen that many times. The effective date, when I counsel clients, and I talk through the issues and I make sure that we're picking the right people, we make these effective dates immediately. But know that if you do that and you give this document, excuse me, to that power of attorney, he or she can go to the bank and add themselves to your accounts and different things. So you want to make sure that you're really picking someone you trust. And I tell clients, do not give this document out. You tell that next agent in line who we are and introduce us. And if something happens, I will be the judge of when to give that document out. We've just seen too much financial abuse to just kind of hand them out willy-nilly. It's also very important that the right types of powers are given. So these documents are broad documents that give huge amounts of power, but without a couple of things, which could be extremely important, without enumerating them, you don't have these powers. So next. So the power to gift is really important. This means that we can do Medi-Cal planning if we need to. And the power to access separate property, if it's a spousal situation, is also important. And if those are not specifically stated that you have those powers in California, you do not have them. So we've had many people come to us where they say, okay, well, mom has Alzheimer's and I need to do Medi-Cal planning because it's really expensive. And we can't help because there's no power to gift. Next. Next. Oh. So the durable power of attorney issues, again, wrong agents or co-agents, springing powers, no ability to gift or use separate property in a spousal situation. And then it's really, really frustrating if you're standing in someone's shoes to help and you don't have any access to logins, passwords, you don't know what the bills are to pay. So I encourage everyone to create a universal list of your logins and passwords for all your financial institutions, your computer, your phone, social media, email, everything, so that when someone is coming to stand in your shoes, they can easily and seamlessly help. Next. So what happens if you pass away? All of us are going to at some point. And unfortunately, people fight over money all the time. My favorite thing about this slide, which I didn't notice, for months, if not years of using it, was that they all had weapons behind their backs. So thankfully, we don't see a lot of that, but it's just kind of funny. Next. So do you need a will or do you need a trust? Next. If you have real estate or other valuable assets and your future beneficiaries, those people you're leaving and naming to inherit from you, are either young, they're not great with money, or they may need a special needs trust, you definitely need a trust. Next. But if you don't have those things, then a will might suffice. Next. And so what is probate? All wills go through probate. If you don't have a will, they go through probate. As long as you have over 184,500, that just went up in April. So this is the new number. And as long as those assets don't have beneficiary designations or transfer on death designations, then you're headed to probate. So in the probate process, the judge is, you have to have an original will. Is it a valid will? If not, the law of intestacy takes over. It says who gets your stuff in what order. And then who is the executor? Who's the person who's going to administer probate or this will, and we want to make sure that you name the right person. You have to get a bond, so you have to have income and good credit. Super expensive. I have a slide I will show you of how expensive it is to go through probate. The assets are frozen for at least, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. It depends how backed up the court is. So when spouses are relying on this or family members are relying on access to this money, it's frozen during that time. We have to notify all creditors. And so we don't do that in a trust administration. It takes a year or maybe 2 years to get through a probate from beginning to end, and it's a public process. So we're notifying 2 layers of next of kin. And if you think those people whom you haven't talked to in decades come out of the woodwork now, you are absolutely right. All right, next. And so these are the costs. So just kind of look here at column 1, look at what your assets are. You do not get to subtract the debt of a mortgage. So let's just say your total value is $700,000. Then you are looking at minimum $34,000 in probate fees. There are also, these are the statutory fees. There are also extraordinary fees depending upon what needs to be done. Half of the statutory fees go to the executor or the administrator, half go to the lawyer. All of the XO, the extraordinary fees, go to the lawyer. It is very expensive and 100% avoidable. Next. So how to avoid probate is to get a trust. You want to make sure that you select the right people, that it's well written, that you fund your trust. That means you are transferring assets from your name into the trust name. And this enables us to control from the grave. Next. So trust administration can go one of 2 ways. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy, as my daughter would say, or it is a nightmare. So the easy peasy way is we pick good trustees. We have our assets organized. We know the debts. We deal with the taxes. We distribute based on a clearly written trust. And then there's family harmony. The other way is you've selected the wrong trustee. We have to go to court. That's a nightmare. You haven't funded the trust properly. We have to go to court either maybe to do a Hegstead petition, which is like a mini probate and not as expensive, or if we don't have enough in place to support that Hegstead, we just have to do a full probate anyway. And then we have, then we deal with the debts and the taxes and the distribution. And in the end, people don't speak to each other. And that is the saddest part to me. Next. So the issues that we see a lot are the wrong people in charge, the wrong trustees, or no one is able to serve. The funding is incomplete. So there are too many assets outside of the trust. And when I say that, and for those of you who have a trust, it is not what the trust says. The trust may say in the back of it, in the schedule, or even in the document itself, say, oh, who gets what, and list all these things out. That is not funding. Funding is who owns the asset. When you get a statement or you look at your deed, you want to make sure it does not say your name as an individual, but says your name as trustee of your trust. We do see a lot of financial abuse, as I mentioned. And so who has access to the accounts is very important. Some of these, especially or only in a spousal situation, have this mandatory split where, you know, when the first spouse dies, then the trust splits into 2 parts. This is not what most people expect. We, like trust protectors, these are third-party neutrals who are able to solve all kinds of problems. We never have to go to court. But most trusts don't have trust protectors. And then if you have pets, you know, we want to know who takes care of your furry children. Next. So the greatest gift that you give the people you love is a regularly updated estate plan. Next. As you all have heard and will continue to hear as you participate in these programs, is caregiver burnout is real. So we all know the warning signs. We all know how to prevent it, but then we still don't do it. And so I'm just here to say very briefly, it's really important you take some time for yourself, you get some reprieve, you do little nice things for yourself, and you rest and you eat well and you sleep, because we do see many caregivers who end up passing away before the person they're caring for. Next. So there's 6 immediate actions, and you can just kind of populate them, create that village and care for yourself, finish and update your estate plan, share your wishes with your family. Don't make this unknown to them. And then organize your assets and fund the trust and update your beneficiaries. And be sure to create that list of passwords and logins or logins and passwords and bills, and make sure you're properly insured. There's a lot of different choices of insurance out there. People don't really know about them. I teach all of our clients, the overview of them, but I don't sell insurance. So I refer out to experts, but there are ways to protect your estate in certain situations. Next. This myth again, that my spouse or kids will be able to handle everything automatically, is just not the case. Next. So step 2, this is for, your spouse or parent, depending upon who's here. I don't get to see faces, which I can't wait until it's safe enough and we can do that in person again. So elder law is really just doing the best you can. Next. And I say, I have all the legal expertise, as Alicia said, I've cared for 7 family members on my own. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of clients navigate this process. And so part of it is law, but the majority is counsel and therapy, and that help to navigate this process. Next. Common issues that we see are the caregiver is overwhelmed by all the complexities, or the elderly person is difficult, or there's family drama. Boy, we see a lot of that, unfortunately. And then if someone doesn't have capacity, then we have to petition for conservatorship in certain situations. And then if the person is running out of money, then we talk about Medi-Cal usually, although there is a VA aid and attendance benefit as well. Next. So this is a sneak peek into long-term care planning. As you may already know, the cost of care is extraordinary. So you can see the numbers there depending upon where you live. These are based on the need for 24-hour care. And unfortunately, it's private pay or long-term care insurance. And then as a last resort, Medi-Cal. Medicare does not cover the cost of care, except after a 3-day hospitalization, and then only up to 100 days. And that up to is more important than the 100 days, but everybody just hears the 100 days. So they think, oh, well, when my person, goes into the rehab, I have 100 days where I'm covered. And that isn't what that means. The up to is critical, because every week they are having a comprehensive meeting about every patient in those facilities. And if you're making progress, you keep going, and then you get to stay there the next week. If you're not making progress, you may get very little notice as the family member, and they may say, oh, at the end of the week, we're discharging so-and-so, and you have to be able to take care of him or her. And this is a surprise and very stressful. So always remember, it's up to that 100 days. And then Medi-Cal is changing the rules next month. So I kind of don't even want to talk about what the current rules are because anyone who calls us now, I'm like, wait the month. But as you may know, you had to only have $2,000 essentially, plus a house and a car and personal property, but $2,000 in your name. And now as of July, it's going up to $130,000. So it will enable a lot more people to qualify. And if you have a dependent, a spouse or dependent in the house, then it will be an additional $65,000 per dependent. So it will really change, how we do Medi-Cal planning. There's also a VA aid and attendance benefit, but since they have this 3-year look back now for the last several years, we do less and less of that. So I'm going to just keep going so I don't run out of time. So for your spouse or parent who is still able to make legal and financial and medical decisions, I have a few things to share. Next. So these 5 immediate actions: get 2 capacity declarations for everyone who is creating the power of attorney. This is for A, we want to make sure that we're able to legally do this, so that's important. But B, we want to make sure that if you need a reverse mortgage at some point in the future, that you have the proof that when you created that power of attorney, you had capacity. And these financial institutions who offer reverse mortgages are asking now across the board 100% that you have to have one capacity declaration showing that you had capacity when you signed that power of attorney. And now more and more of them are asking for 2. So I'm just telling everyone, I don't care if you're in your 50s or 60s or whatever, everything is fine. And you're creating this, get that capacity declaration. It's a little bit of a pain, I realize, but it may really be of benefit later. And then finish or update your estate plan. Make sure your advance directive and power of attorney are immediate, and discuss that gifting authority in the power of attorney with your lawyer for potential Medi-Cal planning, and get the support like Alzheimer's LA, like the Mary Easton Center. I mean, there's just invaluable. So a lot of people will say to me, I have a really simple estate. I don't really need all this. Can I just do the do-it-yourself online options? For some people that works, but on the elder law side, it never works. So don't trust that. There's just too much guidance that you need. Yes. Next slide. I saw a message pop up. I got to hurry even faster. So for those of you where your person doesn't have capacity to make decisions, next. You can't create the documents and update them. So we're headed to conservatorship. And I have 3 immediate actions. I'm going to talk about conservatorship super fast. So if you don't have a directive, you don't have a power of attorney, and you're incapacitated, you're headed to conservatorship. This is where the judge decides everything and strips your powers to vote or drive. It's very expensive. Next. And people will say, well, I don't need one now. My person will be able to handle it, but accidents happen all the time. So for everyone over 18, I say, get your advance directive and power of attorney. Next. So conservatorship issues it's super expensive. It's about $10,000 to start. If there's any contest, either the person who needs to be conserved or someone else who wants to be the conservator, then it can go up from there. It's essentially litigation at that point. And then I always say this is the last resort. We are trying our best with every person who comes to us to try to navigate around having to do a conservatorship. So the next 3 action item steps for you are: create a POLST. This is the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. It is critical to have this for anyone who wants a DNR, a do not resuscitate. It's filled out with your doctor. Make sure that where that arrow is, it says do not attempt resuscitation is checked. And then the next one, you're choosing either selective treatment or comfort focused. And this is a personal decision. Next. Also marshal your assets. This slide alone, I could spend 20 or 30 minutes and answer questions for an hour. So read it. It's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have questions, let me know. It's whoever owns the asset. It's either your power of attorney who's handling it or your trustee who's handling it. And if you start adding people to assets, there could be a lot of complications. So next, it's super important. And lastly, I always say, spend time together and do whatever you can to get on the same page. Next. So we do have this problem in our area, and this is always the most frustrating one that comes to us, is when people have enough capacity to avoid a conservatorship. Judges are very strict on when they grant a conservatorship. But the person is making really poor decisions, or there's family drama and there's abuse. And so next. The only solution is to really find an outside of the box problem solving elder law firm. And oftentimes we have to come up with plan A and then go to B and C. And it is very, very stressful. Next. So find your A team, find the elder law attorney who handles all of the administrations or probates, find end of life experts, create your memorial plan, and get the support and counseling you need. Next. And remember, court sucks. That used to be my headline, court sucks. So I had to put it in there somewhere. Next. So 4 things you should know, and you can just populate those. so many of these plans fail, don't have a false sense of security. If you have family members who have special needs or on SSI, they must have a special needs trust. And you know what happens, so don't wait. And it's easier than you think. This is really a gift. You can do this. It will create peace of mind. And then the next one. So action item checklists, they're all through this presentation. You are going to get this presentation. I do have a big favor to ask next, which is don't assume family and friends have this handled, and just share what you've learned today with as many people as you can. So any questions or you need resources, I'm always here. And next, these are the things that you should look for in an attorney. So study this list, and you deserve to have someone who takes care of you. Next. So any questions that you have, I will answer now. My email is there, Rebecca@Goldfarb, our phone number. Just be sure that you get your questions answered. And thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm sorry we rushed you through this very
I know,
valuable
it's so hard.
information. It's so much. And you do such a great job at sharing it in a way that we can all kind of follow and understand, and rushing you didn't help. But we did still get some questions. So I'm going to share, I'm going to go through some of them with you. Let me double check. Let's see. Okay. So from Teresa, what does trust properly funded mean?
It means that if you create a list of all of your assets, right? You have a house, maybe you have bank accounts, you have retirement accounts, you have investment accounts, maybe cars, maybe a business, whatever assets you have, life insurance, annuities. And then you look at who the owner is of each of those assets. If your name is the owner, the beneficiary, and I'm not giving legal advice here because there's so many nuances, but just big picture, the beneficiary needs to be the trust. That way, when you pass away, it goes to the trust. Or other assets like real estate, and usually investment accounts, the owner is the trust. Right? If you have a business, your business is assigned to the trust. So if all of these things aren't funded, transferred from your name to the trust name properly, the trust has no jurisdiction over it when you pass away. So a lot of people will name people as beneficiaries of life insurance or other things. These assets get administered completely outside of the trust. And sometimes that's what you want, but oftentimes it's not.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Barbara. What is gifting and how does it apply to Medicare?
It doesn't apply to Medicare at all. It does apply to Medi-Cal. So think of the rule right now that you're only allowed to have $2,000 as an applicant, aside from your house, your car, your personal property, and retirement accounts if you're taking your required minimum distributions, meaning you're over 72. But if you have more than 2,000 that doesn't fit in there, we have to gift it. It's called stack gifting. It's a loophole, as I say, in the Medi-Cal rules, but totally legal. California allows for it. Medicaid in other states does not. So your power of attorney has to allow for your agent, where the assets are in your name, to gift them to someone else to get them out of your name to qualify for Medi-Cal. And there's more to it than that, but that's essentially the gist.
From Teresa, a different Teresa, you mentioned the need for two waivers, HIPAA and CMIA. Can you say more about CMIA waiver?
It's just the California version of the HIPAA waiver. So it, in most of these waivers, it will have both in California, but you just want to make sure that you have that. And, if you've come from a different state, maybe you don't have that. And like I said, most people in the medical community will violate this, but you don't want to set up a plan that sets you up for that. And it, right? It's just if it happened inadvertently.
Thank you. From Chris, how much should this cost to do it properly?
That's a really good question. So I kind of jokingly say to people, you get what you pay for. There are people out there who, lawyers who charge in the, I would say, $4,000 to $5,000 range. I find that most of those plans end up costing more in the long run because they may not be done completely. The funding may not be done. Anyone less than that, don't do it. It really, it won't work. So our flat fees are higher than that. We start at $5,700 for a single person and $6,200 for a couple, but that includes a lifelong plan. So in the end, it ends up costing people less. And it just depends. You know, a lot of people want just quick and dirty documents, but in elder law, you can't do it that way. It really needs to be done very thoroughly because there's a very good likelihood that you won't be able to update it later, because once we lose mental capacity, we can't update them.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Let me see here. What if a parent does not have either a trust or a will? What happens? I'm assuming they're now lost capacity. So what's the option?
So if you don't have that, but you do have a power of attorney, it's possible that you can create a trust through a power of attorney. You can't create a will through a power of attorney, but depending upon how the power of attorney is done, you can. Otherwise, it's just going to go through probate when a parent passes away. Alternatively, you can go through conservatorship, where that's on the advanced directive power of attorney side in decision making. Sometimes it comes up where you have no choice and you have to do that. And once you're appointed as the conservator by the court, you can then create a trust to avoid probate.
Okay.
Now, and remember one last thing. Some people will have, you know, real estate or assets in other states. You will go through a probate in every single state. So you need to be sure that out of state assets are transferred into your trust as well.
It's a good reminder. So we got a couple of similar questions about this. How do you get a capacity declaration? And do you get that from a doctor?
It is always from a doctor. So there are forms that we have created that I'm happy to just give to people to take to the doctor and have him or her sign it. There are letters that doctors will just write, but they often aren't clear enough. And if it looks like we might have to go through the conservatorship process, then it's more of a court form that we have to do that. So it's really just bringing the form to the doctor, but it's something you want to talk about before you get to the doctor. You want to make sure he or she is comfortable in doing this for you. I've had many stories of clients where they go to the doctor and then the doctor won't do it. And you've waited weeks or months to get an appointment and then waited, an hour in the waiting room or whatever. And then to get in there and not be able to get it is very frustrating.
So I have a follow-up question myself regarding the declaration. You mentioned you need two, is that right?
That is so I like that if there's a chance someone might need a reverse mortgage in the future.
Okay.
The other time where you might need to is if your power of attorney is springing, meaning you need doctors to deem you incapacitated for it to work. Some of those documents will require two, or if it doesn't say how many you need, the default in California is two. Trusts for someone to resign as trustee might require two. So it depends on the circumstances, whether you need one or two.
Okay. Another question, I'm not sure who sent this in, I'm sorry, but is the booklet provided by the California Medical Association sufficient for setting your healthcare directive?
So yes, the CMA forms are pretty good. They still don't go into the detail that we do, but they're pretty good. And if they're executed properly, they're legally binding.
Okay. Attorneys want to completely rewrite estate plan documents that they didn't create. Is this the norm, and does it cost more?
That's a really good question. So most attorneys will not amend another attorney's work because they don't want to have to stand behind it that it's a good document. If we review the document, the trust, and we think it's pretty good, and the amendments that you want to make are pretty small, we will amend them. allow people to make more than 2 amendments. It gets too sloppy and difficult. There was a case that I heard of, it wasn't mine, it was through a financial advisor. And this guy had made 32 amendments to his trust.
Oh, wow.
It was the biggest mess in the entire universe to administer. So you want to keep those amendments short. So yes, it's very common that lawyers will say, I need to restart. We only say that if it's warranted, and it is more expensive because it's brand new documents. You cannot amend an advance directive or power of attorney. You can only make a new one. And in a will, you can do a codicil, which is like an amendment to a will, but we don't ever do them. It's faster and cleaner to just do a new one.
Okay. Let me see here. From Winston, how do you broach this to family members who might not be willing to hear or work with you on this?
We have a pretty in-depth phone conversation first, right? And we come up with a plan, and I learn stuff, and then we come up with a strategy. And these are always trickier. This is like where it gets into this, we come up with plan A and plan B and plan C, right? And it's more like counseling along this way to do what we can to convince them.
Okay. Yeah. And I know that if families call our helpline and try to or ask to work with a care consultant at our agency at Alzheimer's Los Angeles, we can kind of also help strategize on ways to approach this conversation and other conversations that might be kind of challenging to have with family. It can be difficult to have these conversations. So our care counselors are definitely available to also help kind of strategize. And last 2 questions. What if your assets are in our name? Do you give them to the trust?
So it depends what the asset is, but generally speaking, yes. If it's a house, then it's in your name, then you create a new deed, and the deed is recorded that you are giving it to the trust, but you are likely the trustee, so you still have the same management and control over it.
Okay. And last question, if you already have an estate plan, what is the approximate cost of updating it?
That's always a good question, and I never have a good answer because I don't know what updates you'll want to make. And I don't know, like if you come to us, we have, a flat fee where we review all the documents and then have a couple-hour meeting to go over everything and figure out what you need to do. By the end of that meeting, then I know which direction we're either amending or we're restating the trust. And so without knowing what you want to change or what should be changed, it's really hard for me to say. But our flat fees to review everything and have that initial meeting, it's $9.95 as long as you only have one trust. And then thereafter, it's either hourly or then we go to that other, new flat fee. And then for all of our, Alzheimer's LA and UCLA folks, we credit some of that $9.95 toward the new flat fee.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. I think those were all the questions. Thank you for joining us, but also for, as you say, giving your free legal advice. These are all questions that many people have, and planning elder law and legal documents can be very overwhelming. Even if we all know we need to do them, it's one of those things that's like, oh, I'll just kind of hold on to this because it can be daunting. But again, thank you for making it so easy for us to kind of follow and understand, and for making yourself available for any questions. And if any of you still have questions for Rebecca and want to ask those privately, please contact her by reaching out directly. Her contact information is displayed on the screen, and my colleague Tori is going to share Rebecca's contact in the chat. You can also, in your post-event evaluation, enter or write in a question or share with us your contact information, and somebody from Rebecca's office will reach out to you.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Rebecca.
All I can say is, for those of you who don't have at least your advance directive and power of attorney, please create that today. If you want even just the statutory versions of these documents and you want to do them for free, if you reach out, I will send you how to where to find it on our website. That's totally free, but it's just so important to get these done.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So at this time, we're now going to have a quick 2 to 3 minute stretch break. Please go and fill up your coffee, get some more tea, get a snack, run to the restroom, or just take a moment to stretch, roll those shoulders back, stand up. And when we return, we're going to have my colleague, Tori. She's going to be facilitating our Insight and Inspiration panel. So we'll be back in a couple minutes. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you'll find this next part of our morning to be insightful and inspirational. Today, we are honored to have 4 brave individuals who will share with us how they've navigated a diagnosis of early-stage Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment, or MCI for short. They will share with us how they continue to live their lives after a diagnosis. To experience memory loss and speak publicly about it is heroic and courageous. Our guests today are helping us break down the barriers and stigma that is all too often associated with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Our guests will share how they have adapted, how they balance new responsibilities, and how they navigate their new reality. So I want to go ahead and thank Deborah, Jeffrey, Melinda, and Dan for being with us today.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Hi, welcome. Hi, welcome, Dan and Melinda. Let's see, I think, Melinda, you guys are still muted. You able to unmute yourselves? Perfect. Hi, good morning. Thank you all for being here today. So we'll go ahead and get started. Can each of you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. So let's start with Deborah. Deborah, can you share with us what your diagnosis is and what you did for a living?
Yes, certainly. My diagnosis is mild cognitive impairment, I was an English instructor at Los Angeles Valley College. I was also in charge of professional development training for faculty and staff at the college. I continue to work as a writer. I do a little writing, about 7 hours a week, and edit other people's writing for the union. It's the Los Angeles College Faculty Guild, representing the instructors in the LA system, which is 9 campuses in Los Angeles.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Deborah. And Jeffrey, what did you do for a living? And can you share with us when Deborah was diagnosed?
Yeah, I'm a former journalist and writer, television producer, news. And Deborah was diagnosed in, her symptoms became obvious in about 2019. She was being very forgetful, and over a long process, delayed somewhat because of COVID. We've been pretty much house cats and didn't want to go into hospitals. But over a period of time, it was diagnosed in, when was it?
2021.
2021, the beginning of 2021, mild cognitive impairment. There was a tentative diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Now we're not quite sure about that. She didn't have the classic signs of Alzheimer's, which are amyloid plaques. I'm sure the doctor can get into that later on. That's what we know about the diagnosis. It's very vague.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to get some specifics. Thank you for introducing yourselves and sharing that. And Dan, can you please share with us what your diagnosis is and what you did for a living?
I've worked in the film business for a company called Panavision. My diagnosis was Alzheimer's.
So Alzheimer's, and you work in the film business, or worked in the film business?
They're not connected, but yeah.
Awesome. And let's see, Melinda, what did you do for a living? And can you share when Dan was diagnosed?
Yes, I'm a retired special ed teacher. I work for LA Unified. Dan was diagnosed in about 2021, about 9 months ago, I think. And though I think we started noticing maybe in 2019 symptoms. Okay. Things like forgetfulness. Where's my cell phone? Have you seen my wallet? It's misplacing things.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And let's see. Dan, can you share, was there any other initial symptoms that you experienced that led you to get your diagnosis?
Well, yeah, I had a couple of car accidents. Just, it's just kind of like, apparently with Alzheimer's, you have a depth perception can cause difficulty.
Are you able to just speak up a little? It's a little quiet. Just want to make sure we all can hear you, okay?
Sure.
But you're
okay.
Thank you.
And the other thing, the thing that really kind of got to me was that I went to see my doctor to find out what this, what was happening. And he said, I quote, "You have Alzheimer's, there's no cure." I said, "Thank you."
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. That sounds like it wasn't very good bedside, manner, or a way to hear news like that.
That was the last time I saw him.
Good for you.
He was at
Kaiser.
Kaiser.
Oh, not surprised.
I switched to
To UCLA.
I'm really sorry to hear that diagnostic experience just wasn't, just didn't feel very supportive. It's hard news to get regardless, and to feel like it was just sort of thrown at you without much support is really difficult.
Well, him since. So that, I like the doctors I'm with now.
Let's see, Deborah, Jeffrey, would you like to share a little bit about what your experience was in getting a diagnosis and what some of your initial symptoms were as well?
Well, let me take over and
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
can pick up.
Sure.
So we were fortunate enough to have a very good friend who knows about Alzheimer's and cognitive impairment, and she referred us to a brain specialist where they in Santa Monica, where they do a sort of holistic approach to looking at the brain and cognitive impairment, looking at diet, looking at exercise. And so it's quite different, fortunately for us, unfortunately for Dan, for what Dan's experience was. So we ran through a long panel of tests, both physical and cognitive, and in a very deliberative way. And we're still trying to figure out what's going on. As I said before, it's a very general, vague diagnosis that doesn't give us much guidance. Deborah, you want to?
Well, I noticed that I was forgetting things. I was writing things down more, making little notes. I had little notes all over the house, kind of writing everything down. So I did notice it, but I didn't probably say anything about it. I was kind of didn't want to kind of bring it out in the open, but I guess, you noticed it. So,
She was asking about the reaction of the doctors.
Oh,
your dealings with the doctors.
Dealing with the doctors were, I guess we're okay. We're fine to me. I didn't see any, I didn't have any issues with them, overall.
I'm glad. Yeah. It's, I think, and we're hearing this now, and I'm sure as we continue to talk, we're going to really hear that everyone does have a really unique and different experience with memory loss. And, everyone, there's might be some crossover, but some differences too. So thank you for that. Let's see, Deborah, what was your initial reaction to getting the diagnosis once you found out?
Well, yeah, I was I was very concerned. I didn't know how it was going to change my life, and what I'd still be able to do or not be able to do. So I was kind of unhappy about it, but I'm a very optimistic person in general. I just don't. So I see the glass as half full rather than half empty, and I kind of continued in that way. So I still feel good about my life and my family, and I'm trying to look at the okay side.
Right. To add to that, basically we now, it was obvious what was going on, and it's become clearer since. The diagnosis really just put a label on what was already quite obvious.
Mm-hmm. I hear that a lot, that it sort of reassures what you were already thinking or experiencing.
Yeah.
Kind of lets you at least know what's going on and what you're up against.
Well, I was one other thing I was also kind of concerned about, since I was still working, I was concerned about telling the person that I report to. I do writing for our union, and I had to tell the president of our union that I had this, and in case I made a mistake or in case something got forgotten. And she was amazing, really wonderful. I was really touched and surprised in a way that the response was so positive, and of course said continue to work, and I'll be a support for you. So I felt that was really good, and I was concerned about telling people, and this made it a lot easier.
I kind of piggyback onto that one, to Deborah's account, because it's the opposite for Dan at work. We had noticed, well, Dan told me he was having trouble remembering things. And I thought, well, we do. And I said, here, why don't you try this sort of calendar book? I think it might help. But it got worse. There was a woman that he works with who kind of approached him and said, you seem to be having trouble remembering things. And he kind of opened up to her because he thought she was concerned. But she kind of used that to make him look bad at work. I would call it a character assassination. Also, his assistant was complaining about Dan always forgetting things. And one time this woman called Dan out in front of a few other people that he worked with. And she said, is that project ready for Monday? Because if it's not ready, everybody's going to be mad at you. And I think this kind of behavior ultimately led to him being pushed out of his job. He finally just felt so frustrated and so anxious and so sort of attacked that he just retired. He retired early. And that sort of put us in an uncomfortable situation, in that he couldn't work 8 more months and get his full Social Security. So we ended up for 8 months just, taking the money out of our savings so that he could at least retire with his full Social Security benefits.
Wow.
I think all in all, it was a very bad experience.
I'm so sorry that happened. Yeah. Well, Melinda, Dan, can you share, where did you go to for support as all this was happening and as you were navigating this new diagnosis? Did you tell friends and family, or?
No.
My good friends knew, but it took me a while to kind of, I didn't know what was happening, until that the doctor, dropped the bomb. It was hard for me to do what I had to do all along.
Yeah, so it can be really hard to open up and share about this. It's a really vulnerable thing to tell someone, this kind of news. So it takes a lot of courage. Deborah, Jeffrey, what about you? Where have you turned to for support, or, just help that navigated this?
Well, as I say, friends, and that's been really, really good. I have a women's group that goes walking once a month, and I'm the organizer of it. I'll do it as long as I can to coordinate everybody's schedule and plan the trip. So that's been nice that I still have that connection with people. Our kids went to Sunday school together, and and they're all grown up adults now. So we've been friends for a long time. So that's been good.
And to elaborate, we have 2 magnificent daughters, adults, who have been terrific, who have supported us. One's a long way away in Vermont. The other is in Los Angeles. But we talk to them all the time, and that's been magnificent. I think they're watching now. Hi, Sarah and Sophie. We also have close friends, and we let everyone know what's going on. And they've been very understanding and very supportive. But there's also been sort of a need to know basis, as we come into contact with people. People who don't need to know, we're not that close to, don't have to know. But those who do have been terrific. And as I say, and also I shouldn't leave out the fact that we've been active participants in the support groups run by Tori and AZLA, and that's been very, very helpful in just sharing our trials and tribulations, our stories. and getting feedback from them and learning from them as we hope they learn from us. So that's all been very good.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I
I wanted to,
Yeah. Dan didn't want me to tell anybody in my family, and I can see why he might not want. One of my sisters would for sure put it on Facebook. So I finally negotiated telling one friend because I needed to talk to somebody. But I have only told one sister and my nephew. And I feel guilty just telling them. I don't have enough people. It's kind of, I'm doing sort of as needed. When I saw some friends that I hadn't seen in a while, I just finally told them. I had lunch with about 6 friends and I told them. But then I felt so guilty because you don't want me to tell anybody.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And again, I know it takes a lot of bravery to even just be sharing your experience on a platform like this. So again, I just want to thank you both for being here and being open and honest about, you know, all of the ups and downs that come with this. I think a lot of people watching can relate to what you're sharing. It is, again, really vulnerable to open up to people in your life and to not know how they're going to react or respond to this kind of news. So it's also really good to have support though, and as we've heard, to have people that can be around you as you're going through this. So I wanted to again ask next, Melinda, Dan, if you would like to share if there's anything else that has helped you cope with the new changes in your life. I know there's often a lot of changes in lifestyle, routine, roles. So how have you kind of navigated and coped with those changes since the diagnosis?
I've been doing a lot of exercise,
Yoga, walking.
yoga, 4 days a week, and riding my bike every day, just to keep, you know, so only to go out and just, you know, ride a bike.
Thank you. Deborah, how have you coped with the different changes and, you know, different challenges since your diagnosis? Has anything been helpful to you?
Yeah, there have been a few things. As Jeffrey mentioned, our daughter's been very supportive. I'm still working a little part-time, and the person I report to, the president of our union, I told her about it. She was amazingly comforting and fine, you know, with it. So that was good. Rituals. I don't know, just having consistency in the day. I mean, I kind of, you know, we have our, thank goodness for technology, you know, the Google Calendar and everything. So I'll kind of check it in the morning to see what we're doing that day and make sure I have it written down somewhere. And I make a lot of notes and things on too many scraps of paper, but you know, things to refer to, you know, and again, the calendar and the notes and stuff, just reminders and things to help me. It just help cope, you know.
Deborah finds comfort in ritual, as I started to say, and you know, those would be, you know, we listen to the radio regularly at the same time and have a drink and cocktail.
5 o'clock, time for the news.
Listen to the news and weep and cry together. And we go for regular walks. Try to meet with friends as much as possible. And I think the one thing that I do want to just emphasize is that a lot of this can just seem really depressing and sad, and a lot of it is, but we also try to make room for fun and enjoying ourselves and not talking about the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And just carrying on as best we possibly can to have a good time. And I think that's important for all of us to kind of remember that, yeah, there are bits and pieces of our lives that disappear a little bit for all of us, no matter who we are, what stage we're in, and just to grab hold of the enjoyment that we can find.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. And I wanted to mention, I don't know if you can see in the chat, but Sophie said she's here. Hi, Mom and Dad.
We saw that.
And I also wanted to share, Alexa in the chat just shared, "You're not alone, Melinda." So again, I think, you know, I just want to acknowledge that I think a lot of people watching are just really finding your openness and your shared experiences to be really powerful. So thank you all. Let's see, Jeffrey, Deborah, any advice for professionals that are working with people impacted by memory loss?
Well, as I say, we've been very fortunate that medical professionals, is that who you're talking about, or social workers, or
anything along those lines?
Yeah, just put on your empathy hat, you know, and you know, I'm really sorry that Melinda and Dan had the experience they had, but it's not the first time I've heard this, unfortunately. And I think even medical professionals can be confounded by next steps. And my advice would be, if you're not getting the support you think you need and deserve, look for it elsewhere. I've heard various stories about Kaiser and found people, once they started knocking on the right doors and getting the right referrals, that made a lot of difference in the care that they were having. So so I guess my only advice would be to be as assertive as you possibly can. And if you have questions that are unanswered, but people should also bear in mind that there's not a lot that's known about how to treat this. In fact, it's not treatable. The best we can do is manage it, and that can be fraught. And we're all at different stages. People at different stages in this disease. But to manage it in a way that is respectful and healthy, and no matter what, you know, we all need exercise. We all need to eat well. So there's.
Thank you. And Melinda, Dan, any advice or final things that you would like the audience to know before we go to our Q&A? We have a few questions from the audience, but.
There's an audience? They should try yoga.
And we also just participated in an early memory loss program, very similar to this, for 6 weeks. And that was very helpful. So I'm also doing this. I watched the beginning and I'll watch the rest of this program. I find that was very helpful. Dan's best friend's wife has Alzheimer's. So he sort of put me in touch with the first person, with Monica Moore, to have somebody for support. So I've been given people that I can reach to for support professionally, and that does help. And one thing I'm doing, because when something like this happens, I just have to get into the practical mode. And so I did a lot of research on how to get the best medical support I could for Dan that we could afford. So he switched over to UCLA. We do need to upgrade our will and our trust, so that will be the next thing we're doing. And I just sort of think in terms of, I have to do these practical things, and it makes me feel secure. So I've got sort of like professional support. I would like to have more personal support from my friends, because that makes a big difference. I was surprised at how many people said, oh yeah, if you need help, if you want to talk, if you need to refer my handyman to you, anything. It was just so heartwarming to kind of reconnect with my friend.
Yeah. It's good to have that support. support. Well, thank you both for sharing all of that. And we had someone in the chat say, don't accept mediocrity. So again, I think sometimes in this, as we're navigating Alzheimer's, it is really important to remember that it's okay to advocate for yourself, to not accept, not the best care and support, and to seek out the best care and support. So I hope you both continue to do that. Everyone watching, just make sure that you're feeling empowered to advocate for yourself, because that's really important. Let's see, we had someone here in the chat ask, what is the name of the place in Santa Monica where you saw the brain specialist doctor?
Yeah, it's the Pacific Neuroscience Institute. Pacific Neuroscience Institute associated with Providence St. John.
Thank you. Let's see. Are there any other kind of resources or support that you would recommend outside of that? Someone asked.
What was the group we were just in that you were looking at? No, I mean, it's, there are so many books and so much video and so much attention now that's being devoted to this disease.
Baby boomers are getting older.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
exert our power.
So other than what you've discussed, and I can't think of anything else.
Is this an open group?
Which?
I'm not sure which group. That someone put a chat to us about whether our group is an open group. I'm not. You mean the support group, I guess, that we're in?
If it's the support group, I encourage anyone to contact, all of our contact info will be available after this, and we can get you that. We have another question for you, Deborah. Someone wanted to know, have you noticed changes in language skills? And if so, how have you coped or compensated for that while still working?
That's the one area that I think I don't have as much trouble with. I mean, I used to teach English, at the community college level, and I read a lot and I do crossword puzzles every day. And my language skills seem to be almost intact.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do that, and I can still edit other people's writing, and I write my own things. And so those things haven't really, it's the memory of other things that
yeah, where Deborah's now having the most difficulty is on what's called executive functioning. So for example, it's remembering where she put maybe a computer file that she needs to then work on. That can be very frustrating, just sorting in her own mind where stuff is. Once she gets it, she can read it, understand it, change it,
edit it,
save it, and then go through the whole thing again. Yeah. Where did I put it?
Where did I put
if
that?
It needs revision. So, so we try, I try to help her with organization. As to the other question about coping, we've done various things like Deborah for some time would stand over a pill box and try to remember what day it was so she could take the right pill for the right day. Now there's a clock right next to the pill box. So it's those kinds of adapting. That's exactly right. Coping with
certain things that I don't have to remember. It's just easier if they're done there. Yeah.
So I guess the goal would be to, make things as easy as possible so normal functioning can continue, and that happens to a large extent. The only thing I will say is this, that, we're calling this early stage, and that's a very sobering idea to think about this, that this is a stage. We all have stages of life, and generally have a rough idea of what the next stage might be. With this, we don't. There's a lot of uncertainty as to which direction it's going. Is this going to get worse? If so, how much? No one has the answer to that, and no one knows. So which is, as I say, we try and make the best of it as we possibly can.
And Deborah, one more question for you from Tom. Did your doctor put you on any medication? And if so, has it helped slow the MCI?
No, we haven't had any medication prescribed.
I will say my
I'm
mother.
eating more fish. It's supposed to be good for brain health. You know, there's like a diet, brain health diet, and I'm not really following it, but you know, I do eat. We were vegetarians before. I mean, most of us. He's still a vegetarian, but I'm adding a lot of fish to the diet. Not a lot, but I'm adding enough fish, I think, to the diet. So
That's important. The doctor will touch on that today too. Dan, are you on any medications for your early Alzheimer's?
No, well, the guy at Kaiser gave me
Aricept?
but it wasn't.
It wasn't helpful. Yeah.
I will say this, my mother had dementia and she was taking Aricept. And the whole purpose, as I understand it, of Aricept was to slow the progress of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So you really don't know. I mean, there's no control group, you know, what would it be without the Aricept? We have no idea. So
but she took it. So
she took it and people are taking it and hoping for the best. I'm sure, you know, people are, you know, without following up with cognitive tests to see if there's, you know, what's happening is hard to know.
Okay. And the last question, Velasco asked if either of you, either couple has considered a retirement community or looked into them. We've been running into capacity issues, I think, with trying to find an opening in a community. That's something either of you have looked into yet?
No, we haven't. And we probably, well, I don't know. We haven't gotten to that point. At this point, we would love to be able to use our house and have someone work with us if that's necessary. That's you know, I'm hoping a long way down the road, but that's what we're talking about for the time being.
Yes, Dan wants to stay at home.
Yeah.
That's the plan for as long.
Yeah, I think that's
if you can, that's probably
the prevalent view of most people. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and it looks like we had one last question come through. Do either of you have any tips or suggestions for if and when you try to learn a new habit or skill? So something that helps you learn something new.
Do you?
Well, I write everything down. It's just, and then refer back to my notes. And then once I feel like I know what I'm doing, I don't have to look at it anymore. But I do make a lot of written notes that I little cheat sheets if I need to learn something new, remind myself what to do.
And yeah, that of course is the big challenge, I think, for people with Alzheimer's. They say that people with Alzheimer's are unable to learn new things. So learning can be a problem. We've done a couple of small things where you do the same thing over and over and over again and figure it out. But mostly I think the way that we're adapting is the things that Deborah had been doing. She was taking care of the finances before, for the most part. Those are now my job. Those things are now my job. And I guess for Deborah, maybe that's a silver lining.
You can do it now.
Right. So that's one.
Well, I used to work at a bank, so I'd help people. They would come in, and one of the jobs I had was helping people with reconciling their statements. So I kind of was good at doing that. So, but we're sharing jobs now.
Dan, do you have any final advice for someone trying to learn something new before we wrap it up?
Something new.
Well, you know, he was having a lot of trouble in the beginning of this placing thing. So it's now like these things will always go here. So that's something that seems to work. And again, he writes things down. We always write a shopping list. It's not like, even if you're going to go to CDS for one thing, just write it down.
I think that's a good tip. Well, I want to thank all four of you again for joining me today, for sharing with all of us. It's been really insightful, really inspirational, and I think really helpful helpful. We did even get some people in the chat. Melody shared that this has been very helpful for her to hear. Winston said, I wanted to say I appreciate and thank you, Jeffrey, Deborah, Melinda, and Dan. So a lot of people in the chat are sharing, thank you so much, thank you so much. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure to hear from you. And now, thank you. And now I would like to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Monica Moore, who is the Community Health Program Manager at the Mary Easton Center for Alzheimer's Disease Research at UCLA. So welcome, Monica. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to Deborah and Jeffrey and Melinda and Dan for sharing your honest stories. I think that's one of the beautiful things about this early memory loss conference is really the beauty of just being raw and being honest about emotions and how there are good times and there are bad times. So we are honored to be able to be here and to co-sponsor this event with Alzheimer's Los Angeles. So I wanted to just introduce the Easton Center, tell you a little bit about what we do, who we are, as well as to get some audience interaction. You know, it's a little challenging in this world of Zoom to, literally I'm talking to a computer, but it's nice to be able to try to get some audience interaction here. So first of all, just letting you know who the Easton Center is. We are the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at UCLA. We're a comprehensive care center where we have a memory and disorders clinic with quality, top-level neurologists, behavioral neurologists who can really give you a thorough and accurate diagnosis as opposed to just a simple, you're 85, you have memory loss, it must be Alzheimer's. You know, people deserve a lot more of a thorough diagnosis. So we have a really great program there. Of course, we do research. I say these are the super smart people in their labs trying to figure out what this disease is, what we are looking for, how can we truly impact change with this disease and with the course of the disease and all of you who are affected. We also have our caregiver support groups. I know Melinda and Dan, I'm grateful to them for, they've been part of our groups and grateful to other people who are here today who are also part of our support groups. So we have a wide variety of groups. We also go beyond just Alzheimer's disease. We have a group for people with dementia with Lewy body caregivers, frontal temporal dementia, young onset Alzheimer's disease. So again, we really reach out, do more of the gamut of all different types of relationships with our support groups. And then we have community education, which allows us to do things like this, go out into the community, talk about research, talk about what we do and why this is all so important. So I think, Rick, is it my poll time? Can I toss in my poll here? All right, I have a little poll question here. All right, here we go. So I have 3 questions for all of you. First of all, I want to know how many people here participate in clinical trials. That is the other part of what the Easton Center does. After we're done with the poll, we'll show the next slide that talks a little bit about our trials. So anyone here currently participating in a clinical trial, and any kind of clinical trial, any kind. Have you ever participated in a clinical trial before? Whether it's Alzheimer's disease or dementia, or maybe it's diabetes, or maybe it was a breast cancer or a trial. So any kind of trial. Do you know somebody who has participated in a trial? And then also, do you know if anyone, anyone who has benefited from a trial? So these are our 4 questions, not 3. My apologies on that one. So take a moment, answer those questions, and once it all gets populated into our form, we will publish those results. I feel like we need the Jeopardy music right now, you know, so we can see, make sure everyone's voting. All right. All right, and the close the poll. Here we go. Let's see what our results are. Okay, so we have 2 people. Thank you to the 2 people who are currently participating in a clinical trial. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate your time. We appreciate what you give to science. We appreciate what you give to the greater community. For those who have ever participated in a clinical trial, we have 1 other person. Again, thank you. It's very important to for participation, and we will talk about that as well. Do you know anyone who has participated in a trial? All right, we've got 14 people. So again, we're seeing numbers grow a little bit more. And then we look at this next question. Do you know anyone who has benefited from a clinical trial? Only 9 people say yes. But you know what that real answer is? Everybody here has participated, has benefited from a clinical trial. Everybody here. The medications that any of you take are all medications that once went through a clinical trial. That Tylenol, that Advil, that heart medication that you may take, the diabetes medication that you may take, those all went through clinical trials to be able to be here, to be able to be safe and FDA approved for consumption in the general population. So actually everybody here has benefited from the results of a clinical trial and from others' participations. So when we look at the world of how important it is for this participation, you know, currently most medical knowledge that we have is based upon the experience of white males. They're the main people who participate in clinical trials, but we know that's not really a true representation of our communities and of our world. You know, women and minorities are vastly underrepresented in clinical trials. If 2/3 of the Americans with Alzheimer's are women, but that's not at all a representation in terms of the number of people who participate in trials. African Americans are only 5% of the population of clinical trials participants. And African Americans are actually twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia than Caucasians. So we see, again, this need to truly be involved with trials. Also, we realize that, you know, we're all different, right? I'm different than Tori, than Alicia, than Dan, than, you know, we're all so unique, and medications affect us all differently as well. You know, some people can take a Benadryl and it's a lifesaver medication. Other people can take a Benadryl and it knocks them out, and others can take a Benadryl and it will, you know, just rev them up. So we see how we are all so unique in that world. When we think about clinical trials, things that are existing right now at UCLA, we have a wide variety of different trials that are taking place. We have some interventional trials where there's actually a medication that will be that is given to see if we can change the course of the disease. So we have one for frontal temporal dementia, vascular dementia, and also looking at familial Alzheimer's disease, where it's more something that's in the family. Observational studies that exist. There's studies for caregivers. You know, we need to learn also what is the true dementia burden that somebody who is caring for somebody with Alzheimer's experiences. And then, you know, we're always looking for people just to sort of be what we call our participant pool. So if you are willing, if you are able, and if you want to be a part of it, but you just don't know what exists right now, we have this pool where people can just sign up. It's a simple conversation to see how we can engage more people in our trials. Well, then we can ultimately make some change in this world of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. So my other job here, I have just a few minutes to talk about our role of trials at UCLA and research, but I'm also very honored to be able to introduce our next panelist, or our next speaker today. Our next speaker is Dr. Timothy Chang. He is a neurologist at UCLA in movement disorders neurology. Dr. Chang received his bachelor's from Stanford University and an MD and Ph.D. from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He completed his residency in neurology and fellowship training in movement disorders at UCLA. During his fellowship training, Dr. Chang completed a postdoc research fellowship in genetics before being appointed a position of assistant professor of neurology at UCLA. So we are very grateful to be able to have Dr. Chang here today. He's going to talk a bit about the myths and truths of Alzheimer's disease. And then I will come back and we'll open up for a Q&A session when he's done with his presentation. So again, if you have any questions during his talk, please put them in the Q&A. We'd be happy to be able to have a nice discussion to wrap us up for this morning. So Dr. Chang, thank you for being here. Nice to see you.
Thanks so much. Great to see you, Monica. Thanks for the introduction. And I'm happy to be here to talk to everyone a little bit more about the myths and the truths of Alzheimer's disease and what we see in clinic. So next slide, please. So we'll just start off with a few myths, and then we'll go into some questions that were that some of the previous participants had asked that we wanted to bring up. So we'll just get started here. So one of the myths is that dementia and Alzheimer's disease are the same thing. So I just wanted to clarify this first off, that Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. It accounts for most of all dementia cases, but there are many other types of dementia, and that includes frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia. So when we think about how you define dementia, dementia is really the loss of cognitive function, thinking, remembering, and reasoning, and behavioral issues. So those are the kind of domains that we look for, but also we want the definition of dementia uses the fact that these problems start to interfere with a person's daily life and activity. So I think of dementia as a broad umbrella term, and then under dementia, there's multiple types of diseases, one of the most frequent being Alzheimer's disease. Next slide. The second myth is that dementia is inevitable with age. And I think we hear this a lot from many patients, and it's pervasive through the community that many people think that memory loss or thinking problems are just inevitable with age. But, you know, it's not normal for people, even as they age, to start having problems with function in their daily life, like needing help cooking or dressing with their finances. That's not a normal part of aging. We know that age is the biggest risk factor, but it doesn't mean that you will have dementia once you turn a specific age. So we know that in the Alzheimer's Association has published, every year they have published great facts about Alzheimer's disease. And one of them is that the prevalence of dementia in terms of the percentage of people that have it who are 65 to 75 is at least 3 to 10%. And as you increase with age, the percent of people that have dementia increases as well. So if you're 75 to 85, it's 17%. And if you're over 85, then it's almost 32% of people that have a dementia diagnosis. Next. Memory loss always signifies dementia. So that's not always the case. So definitely memory loss is a component of dementia, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is how dementia is defined. We really are looking for if memory loss starts to interfere with your daily function during life. And in addition, you can't just have memory loss to be diagnosed with things like Alzheimer's disease. There need to be other domains that are affected, like planning or language problems and other conditions like other cognitive domains like that. All right, next. Dementia only affects older adults. This is not completely true. I mean, most of our patients are over 65, but we know that dementia can affect younger people. We see many of these younger patients in clinic, possibly 30 to 65. There definitely are people with dementia. Some of these are genetic related, some of them are not, but dementia doesn't only affect older adults. Next. So a family member has dementia, so I'll get it. This is not completely true. We know that there are some genetic risk factors, but just because a family member, your mom or dad had it, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to have it. Some people have a higher likelihood of getting Alzheimer's or dementia if their parents had it, but it's not 100% guarantee. Great. Okay, dementia signals the end of a meaningful life. Yeah, so I mean, I think people do think this, and this is a great fear for many people, but you know, from the patients that we see, we know that they still live meaningful life, and they can still be active. They may be restricted on some of the activities that they can do, but I always encourage patients to try to live as normal of a life as they can, and really try not to let the dementia really bring your meaning or your activity in your daily life down. All right, next. Okay, so one of the questions that we commonly get is what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia? So I think the most common types of dementia we see in clinic are Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. And Alzheimer's disease is due to specific proteins that are abnormally accumulated in the brain. Vascular dementia is similar. You can think of it as like small mini heart attacks, but it's happening in the brain. So we know that the blood vessels that go deep into the brain, sometimes they can get blocked or clogged as people age, and that causes certain brain cells to die, and that in turn can lead to a dementia-like syndrome. And then other characteristics for these other diseases, so frontotemporal dementia, most people have predominantly behavior problems and start to kind of behave socially inappropriate. Lewy body dementia, patients can have hallucinations, and they have stiffness and tremor like Parkinson's disease. Progressive supranuclear palsy also has dementia late, but that's predominantly defined by Parkinsonian symptoms and a lot of falls actually early on. And cortical basal syndrome, usually people have problems using their hands on one side or the other in terms of remembering, for example, how to button buttons or use a fork and knife. So that's something called what we call apraxia. So there's many different types, and that's part of what we try to do in neurobehavior and neurology, to try to differentiate these and define which one certain patients may have. All right, next. Okay, now here are some of the questions that we frequently get in clinic and that have been submitted by previous participants. So the first one is, what does a typical diagnostic workup look like for Alzheimer's or dementia, and what tests should be included? Actually, the most important thing really is the history. We learn in school that, let's say like 80% of the diagnosis you can figure out based on history. So that's actually the most important to really understand what's going on, what problems people are having. The second part is the physical, is really doing the exam, specifically doing neurocognitive testing. And that can vary depending on the patient's condition. It can be kind of I usually do a short test in clinic, about 10 minutes, but then there's also very long neuropsychological testing that sometimes we'll ask patients to do that may take like 4 hours or 6 hours with the neuropsychologist. There's 2 lab studies that we like to get, a thyroid test and to check your B12. There are many other tests that potentially we can run, but these are for sure everyone typically checks these. And then the last one is an MRI brain. So we want to look at the structure of the brain. And mostly this can help us determine if patients have a vascular dementia that's contributing to the issues, where on that MRI brain, we potentially can see a lot of changes that may look like vascular disease. If we just use a standard MRI brain, that there is some subtle hints that can help us identify if a patient has Alzheimer's disease or not, but it's not very specific or sensitive. Like it won't really give us a 100% diagnostic about if someone has Alzheimer's disease or not. Many patients who have dementia, their MRI brain looks relatively normal, actually. Okay, next. When is a PET scan, MRI, spinal tap needed? Should we push for these? So really, aside from kind of the MRI brain, which most people will get, the PET scan and spinal tap are not always necessary. There's different types of PET scans now, and I think part of the issue with PET scans is sometimes insurance coverage, but we typically get them when we're concerned about atypical types of dementia that we don't commonly see, like the frontotemporal dementias or Lewy body dementia. The PET scan can be helpful. And for spinal tap as well, essentially when we're thinking about, is this really Alzheimer's disease or some other types of dementia, then we may do these tests. I would say the PET scan is relatively easy for patients to do. The spinal tap obviously is more intrusive, and sometimes people opt not to do that. Both can provide useful information, but again, these tests are not 100%. Really, the most important thing that we always consider is the history, the story about what's actually going on, because if a PET scan says someone looks like they have Alzheimer's, but they don't have symptoms of that, then clinically we wouldn't call them Alzheimer's. So we put kind of all these things together and don't rely solely on PET scans or spinal taps, but they can be helpful in supporting different diagnoses we're considering. All right, next. How fast will the disease progress? Is there a way to slow down the progression? Yeah. So it's difficult because a lot of the scales we use to determine the progression of Alzheimer's disease and dementia in general are just kind of points or scales on just numbers. So let's say it's a scale from 1 to 18 here, and we know that there's some progression of like 2-3 points, but that doesn't really mean much to most people. So I usually like to say patients can go from, if they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, from living relatively independently to starting to need some help from a spouse or other people in the family in 3 to 5 years. That's a type of slow progression that we typically see. And yes, progression can be slowed down, and we'll address that in the next slide here. So what medications are available for Alzheimer's dementia, and what do they actually do? So the main medications that we consider are anticholinesterase inhibitors. So those are donepezil or rivastigmine, and they increase these neurotransmitters, the cholinergic system in the brain. That has been shown to help improve symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Another one is memantine. So this is an NMDA receptor antagonist, and this is most useful for moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease. The way they work, people aren't exactly sure, but they think it has some neuroprotective component. Kind of the more recent one that has been approved is aducanumab, which is a monoclonal antibody that is given by IV injection. And this one blocks and tries to clear the bad protein that's accumulating in Alzheimer's disease, which is amyloid. And the last thing that we always talk about, sometimes these medications, they have some mild benefit, but there's many other things that are going on that we want to control and help improve. So that includes managing vascular risk factors, so like hypertension, diabetes. If there are behavioral issues, we try to treat those. And then we also think about some non-pharmacologic treatment as well. Okay, next. Okay. If someone has serious side effects to these medications, will they decline faster because they are not taking it? So the answer is yes. I mean, that's why we have these medications, but there's kind of two sides to this story. So for the anticholinesterase inhibitors, we know that they can delay loss of independence. So going from independence to needing some help by a few months. For memantine, we know for cognition, function, and behavior, there is some mild benefit. So for example, there was no change for people that were taking memantine versus some mild worsening in people that were taking a placebo over 6 months. So what I like to say is that there is some mild benefit. So definitely if patients are able to take it, we do prescribe it and continue prescribing it. But at the same time, if patients are having side effects, we can't force and continue to take this medication. I think the one slight saving grace for now is that there's mild benefit. So it's not like there will be a significant drastic change in someone who's taking the medication or not. All right, next slide. We get this question frequently: do natural supplements help with decreasing progression of disease? The only real type of supplement that's been definitely studied and has likely some benefit, although more studies are needed, is vitamin E. So we typically recommend 1,000 international units twice a day, and there's some evidence that this helps also mildly delay progression of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And there are many other supplements people have tried or talked about. Most of the time they are studied in animal models, rare, and sometimes they're studied in humans, although they're small studies. So there are people have asked about and talked about antioxidants, resveratrol, curcumin, vitamin D, and these other supplements too. But the last point about vitamin B12 is that obviously if you're deficient in B12, based on the lab test that we do want people to take B12, and we usually retest that in a few months to see that their vitamin B12 levels go back up. Okay, next. Are there alternative medications such as psychotropics or medical marijuana recommended to help with anxiety or other symptoms related to dementia? So, you know, we try to use these antipsychotics sparingly because there are black box warnings in older adults that it increases mortality. But sometimes they're necessary to help control behavior. Otherwise, it's very difficult for patients and caregivers. So we do use them sometimes to help with behavior symptoms. I'd say anxiety, we definitely do treat that commonly, and we typically use medications that are used for just general anxiety, like if you did not have dementia. And those are these SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So those include sertraline and escitalopram. In terms of medical marijuana, we typically don't use medical marijuana or recommend it. Some patients do choose to use it to help with anxiety, but there are prescription medications that we use, including these SRIs, that can be helpful. Okay, next. Are there lifestyle nutrition changes that can help with brain health? Yeah, so we do think about this, and there are studies that have shown on the right that a combination of these controlling lifestyle and nutrition really can improve the progression, can delay the progression of disease. So this includes reducing vascular risk factors like I talked about, cholesterol, hypertension, smoking, diabetes, obesity. Those all can contribute to vascular dementia, and many patients typically have multiple types of pathology happening in the brain. So the most common type of dementia is actually a mixed dementia, which typically includes an Alzheimer's-like dementia and a vascular dementia. So if we really focus on reducing these vascular risk factors, that can help improve the vascular part of the vascular dementia. I think nutrition, people talk about in general, we just recommend a heart healthy diet. And there's many studies out there, for example, about the Mediterranean diet, for example. Definitely always are supportive of exercise, and trying to do that, 5 to 6 times a week for 30 minutes, depending on what type of exercise patients like to do. And cognitive training. Some people also ask about this in terms of, is there a specific test or a specific word puzzle that they should be doing? And there isn't a specific recommendation really that really we want to do things that people enjoy so they continue to do it. But it's not like we specifically recommend Sudoku or anything. But the other component that we do think about is really trying to keep patients engaged socially, being involved in family events, talking to family members, because the more people become isolated and are not participating, we do notice that there is more significant of a decline, or that family members believe that patients are getting worse. And I think that does contribute it. So that is another component we do recommend. So as you can see, a lot of these lifestyle nutrition changes are really multidisciplinary, where there's multiple components that we try to address. And next slide. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. I think if you have questions about your own health, reaching out to your own doctor for a real personalized consultation is the most helpful, but we also have information here about clinical trials or UCLA clinic information and appointments as well. So thanks so much, everyone, for your time. Happy to take some questions as well.
Thank you, Dr. Chang, for sharing this important information on Alzheimer's. And we also thank you for the questions that you are going to be answering. I always find this is sort of that really neat part about a conference like this, is where people actually have an opportunity to ask a doctor the questions, as opposed to just sending a question on through their MyChart or something like that. So it's a nice opportunity. So I really encourage everybody here today to put your questions in the Q&A. We have a few that have already come in. And so we will be going through those questions. But again, if you have anything that is very specific to your situation, in terms of my husband is on blank medication and blank, talk to your doctor about that. Those are questions that Dr. Chang can't really answer because he doesn't know your situation and he doesn't know all of your backgrounds or the other medications that you're taking. So anything along those lines, we really encourage you to reach out to your doctor to be able to get thorough medical care, get those types of questions answered. So some of the questions that we have here, let me first pull up somebody at the very beginning actually of our event. I actually believe it was during the time when our elder law was speaking that this question came up. Someone wanted to know what was cerebral amyloid angiopathy. Is that something that you can answer for us, Dr. Chang?
Yeah, sure. So it is a less common condition, and just like how amyloid can accumulate, the bad protein can accumulate for Alzheimer's disease, some patients have for some reason, a predisposition of this amyloid accumulating in blood vessels. And when that accumulates in blood vessels, that can cause small bleeding, and it can cause cognitive changes as well. It kind of depends where it is and if it causes associated inflammation or other types of problems. But yeah, it's a less common condition, and but it can contribute to memory problems.
Great, thank you. Thank you for answering that. Another question that we have, let me pull it up here. I'm going through some of our questions here. Say Jack asked the question about recruitment for trials regarding mild cognitive impairment. He was asking if we are currently recruiting for any MCI trials. Dr. Chang, do you want to take, are you able to answer that question?
I don't think we are recruiting right now. Can you correct me if I'm wrong though, Monica?
I can correct you. I can correct you on that one, yes. So actually at UCLA, we are recruiting for, we have a study called the ADNI study, which is actually, it's an observational study.
Oh, the observational study, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so we're recruiting for people with normal cognition or also with mild cognitive impairment. So that is one trial that we currently have. There is another one that's looking at biomarkers and neurodegenerative disease, and that's also one that we're looking for mild cognitive impairment. And then we have one for vascular contributions to cognitive impairment and dementia. So we have a few that are observational, and actually we have one interventional study that is also mild cognitive impairment. So I believe that the Easton Center's page on clinical trials will be sent out with some post-event information. And also we can put our website in the chat where you're able to go there and to be able to find out information regarding clinical trials. And then there's also some that say at USC, other places, depending upon where you live. I always say go to the place that is closer to you, so it's actually a successful experience for you. So there's lots of different options available. Another question that we have, and I think you sort of touched on this, Dr. Chang, but I'd like maybe if you could just elaborate, because we've received it twice since then. Is it possible to have combination dementias? This woman's husband has damage in both temporal lobes shown in Alzheimer's, but also symptoms that point to FTD. So could you please address that question?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible to have mixed pathology that's happening. I think that's actually the most common thing we see, like I mentioned for Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. But in terms of the other ones as well, like FTD and Alzheimer's disease, that actually does happen as well. So it's definitely possible. Sometimes though, the frontal temporal dementia, given the name, has effects to the frontal and temporal regions as well. So that could potentially be just frontal temporal dementia by itself. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then are we seeing more memory loss in Alzheimer's disease today as compared to, let's say, 25 to 30 years ago?
I'm not sure I completely understand that question. Like, is dementia worse now than?
My thought, at least in terms of this question, is are we seeing more of it in the clinic, or do you think it's also just more? I think there's lots of factors with this. Like, is it an awareness? Is it more in the clinic, or is it actually happening more often?
Yeah, Yeah, well, I think it's more of the awareness actually, and more a better us detecting cognitive problems. So I think now more patients are bringing it up. I think there's also more of the aging population, so that makes it seem like it's more prevalent. But I think having said that, we still have a long way to go. I think looking at our data and our studies here, even though we think the prevalence is 10% in the population, when we look at patients that we see at UCLA, patients above 65, it's much less than 10%. And we're trying to understand what that gap is. I think some of the potential issues, maybe people think it's part of normal aging, or primary care providers are not asking about memory and cognitive issues frequently, or we're not able to address it. So I think there's multiple components happening that makes it more prevalent now, dementia in general.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. What effects, if any, does the keto diet have on helping with Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, I think clinically we don't typically recommend a specific diet. I think, so there's probably minimal effect for the keto diet. So I typically don't recommend that diet specifically.
Great, thank you. Other questions that we have here. What are some of the side effects of memantine?
Yeah, I mean, most patients don't have too many side effects. Sometimes they can have some slowed heart rate and kind of making you feel a little fatigued. Sometimes there's rare skin rashes and other conditions like that, but typically memantine does not have too many side effects. I'd say for donepezil and other medications, they commonly can have diarrhea, but that's also in a rare percentage of patients.
Mm-hmm. And what suggestions do you have for family members? And I think this is a really good question, again, from the doctor's point of view, for family members who think they're fine, but let's say the parent may think they're fine, but the family all around sees that there are problems, when in fact that the cognition is not okay. How do you get somebody into a doctor's office? What do you suggest in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways to go about doing it. I mean, many patients with dementia don't always recognize their symptoms. So that's pretty common. But when some family members believe there's an issue and others do not, I think that does happen frequently, and they do come to clinic. And when we ask more pointed questions about, hey, really, what are the issues? And potentially we have objective tests to show that, for example, if we do a short test in the clinic and normal is a 26 out of 30, but people are getting 20s and 18s and 16s, and that can be a little more convincing for the rest of the family members. I think getting them into the clinic in general may be difficult, but many patients still are seeing their primary care for other types of issues like heart issues or cholesterol, things like that. And I think bringing up cognitive problems during that primary care visit is a good way to go about doing that. And there are actually in primary care clinic, there are very short tests that can be done in 5 minutes that many primary care physicians know how to do. And that also can kind of push people towards realizing that maybe there are some cognitive problems happening. But you're right, it is difficult. I think our brains are very capable of kind of making up and adapting to the issues that we have and making it seem like there really aren't too many issues, or coming up with actually, well, quote unquote, excuses of why they forgot things. And there's a lot of explaining away that we hear in clinic as well. So I think being aware of that a lot of this may be not only from the patients, but other caregivers and spouses may try to explain away why there are memory issues. But I think you really should think about how has someone's cognition changed from now versus, let's say, 5 years ago. That if you think about that, then many patients realize, oh, my family member would never have forgotten to do that, or would never have, gotten lost before going on this path to the supermarket or something. So that's one. There's multiple ways to try, but that's probably one of the reasons why dementia and other things are underdiagnosed as well.
Absolutely. And then when somebody does bring their loved one to, let's say, to the neurologist office, often the word of If they say, oh, we're here because we're afraid my mom has memory loss, but we don't want to say that in front of the loved one because, of course, again, they don't. What's the best way for when working with your doctor to be able to sort of mitigate that? Is it, let's say, sending you information in advance? Is it sending information through the MyChart or some sort of patient portal? What do you prefer as the neurologist in those situations?
Yeah, I think a message before can definitely be helpful, or potentially after, to talk about it in a follow-up visit as well. But I think one way I think memory sometimes can be a loaded word. So I like using the word just thinking issues instead of like cognitive, because sometimes some people will recognize that they may have trouble reading or other types of issues, that it's not just a memory problem. So kind of generalizing the cognitive issue to potentially something that's less associated with, dementia or Alzheimer's disease can be helpful in bringing that up in front of patients. But I know it's difficult. I think being honest with the provider is helpful, and sometimes having side conversations can get the ball rolling, but I typically don't like to do that. I just, like to do it with the patient so everyone's on the same page, because it can just be confusing and kind of unfair for the patients as well if there's side conversations happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know we have a whole slew of questions. Most of them probably could take up a whole nother hour's worth of a presentation, but unfortunately we don't have time to address all of the questions. We will try to answer some of them in the chat, or we will hold on to these and then get back to you, try to answer some of the questions privately if we do have your information. So Dr. Chang, again, thank you so much for your time. I know we are, actually, no, never mind. I think we do have just another minute or two. Sorry, I just got another message saying that I have a few minutes. Okay, is there anything in particular that you want people to know in terms of testing, in terms of, being able to properly diagnose, anything that you feel is probably the one question that people come to your office the most with, that would really be able to try to help the most people here today? And I'm totally putting you on the spot on that question, so my apologies.
No, it's okay. I think one thing people don't recognize is that dementia and Alzheimer's are not just about memory. So that's why we ask about these other functions, like executive function in terms of planning and language problems, getting lost. So people should really think about that and notice that if those other component or personality problems, if those really are happening, then it's really something you should bring to your provider. And I think sometimes it happens too late, where it's not recognized until we ask it. And the other thing I talk about frequently, actually, we talked about a little bit in the slides, is kind of living an active and meaningful life. And, it is scary for family members, the patients and caregivers in general, but I think the goal really of our job, there are medications that we try to help with the symptoms, and research-wise, we're working on new cures that hopefully will be developed for Alzheimer's disease. But it really is a team effort, and really trying to maximize people's current cognitive function with still being able to enjoy their life and enjoy their time with family. So that's our goal. And unfortunately, in neurology, we can't cure many of our diseases. So we try our best really to work together and mitigate some of the symptoms that develop. But I think people can still have active, meaningful lives.
Great, thank you. Question here, is there early onset dementia or only Alzheimer's? And I think that'd be an important thing to be able to really define. What is that? What is the defining line for something to be called early onset?
Yeah, so typically we think about that as like an age cutoff. Let's say there's no real number, but let's say before 50. But so there definitely is early onset dementia, and of the dementias, other types of dementia can happen early on, not just Alzheimer's, like frontotemporal dementia or PSP or those other types of dementias. So yeah, many of our diseases, if you have a genetic mutation in specific genes, there actually aren't that many genes, maybe a handful of genes that are known to cause these early onset types of dementia.
Great, thank you. Any medications or other interventions that can help with visual hallucinations?
Oh, yeah. So visual hallucinations can happen later on in Alzheimer's disease, but also can occur in Lewy body dementia. But
Besides the antipsychotics, which we do use frequently, I think that word sounds like scarier than it really is, but those medications, for example, are quetiapine. But other medications that we use, for example, in movement disorders for hallucinations that happen either late in Parkinson's disease or Lewy body dementia, is pimavanserin, is called Nuplazid. That actually works relatively well, and we've had patients, specifically definitely with Lewy body, that have really bad hallucinations, and Nuplazid works. This pimavanserin works actually very well. Other times it doesn't work that well, and we use it in combination with other antipsychotics. But those are the kind of the two main categories that we use for hallucinations.
Great, thank you. And I think we have a lot of other questions, but also realizing the time constraints that we are under. Again, I want to reach out to let everyone know that if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is in the chat. Tori also put the Easton Center website in the chat as well. Thank you, Tori, so that we're able to, if you have questions regarding trials and information, reach out to those. And again, Dr. Chang, thank you so much for taking some time, especially today on a Saturday. Really do appreciate it. We're very grateful to you. Thank you so very much.
Great. Thanks.
Now, oops.
All right. With that, we've reached the end of our program. On behalf of Alzheimer's Los Angeles and our partner, Mary S. Easton Center for Alzheimer's Disease Research at UCLA, and Elliot and Marcia Stainer, who have generously sponsored our conference, as well as Biogen. We would like to thank you all for joining us, and we hope that the information that we shared was insightful and useful, and it will hopefully make this journey a little bit less challenging for you. Before you sign off, we have one last poll and then just a quick couple of reminders. So if we can go ahead and do that quick poll, just something fun. And as you guys are looking through that, lastly, we're always looking to improve. So we ask that you please take a moment to complete the evaluation by clicking on the link that is going to be shared in the chat. And a link to the evaluation will also pop up once you close out from the program at the end. And as a reminder, completing the evaluation will enter you into a drawing to receive a gift card. We would really appreciate your feedback. It's really helpful for us. And if you're not able to complete this evaluation today, we will be emailing you the link and any additional resources, and include additional resources in that email in this coming week. The event was recorded, so we'll also be able to share that with you. You can always reach out to any of us here listed on this slide, to Alzheimer's Los Angeles, to Rebecca Goldfarb, and to Monica at UCLA. Monica is very helpful. Like Heather said at the beginning of our program, she is really part of our Alzheimer's LA family, and we really, really appreciate her and just the partnership with the Mary Easton Center. And just looking at your guys' poll, how are you going to spend the rest of your day with friends and family? That's lovely. Reading a book, going for a walk. I haven't been outside since I got here, but it was pretty cloudy or overcast, but hopefully it'll be a nice day to just spend outside. So that'll be great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And as I said, any questions, please feel free to reach out. Our helpline number is here on the screen as well. And you all should have my email. You can email me also. Thank you.